This is Austin Liti Limits, where authors talk to authors about books and the craft of storytelling. Sponsored by Blue Ink Review, because typing the end is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com.
In this episode of Austin Liti Limits, we talked with author Dean Bakopoulos. Dean grew up in the Detroit, Michigan area, graduated from the University of Michigan, and got his Master of Fine Arts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. A two-time National Endowment for the Arts Fellow, Dean's first novel, Please Don't Come Back from the Moon, was a New York Times notable book and turned into a movie starring James Franco. Dean co-wrote the screenplay. His third novel, SUMMERLONG, is a humorous tale that follows the journey of a married couple who discover a life full of lessons when that life goes awry in their sleepy Midwestern town through a sizzling summer. Welcome to the show, Dean Bakopoulos.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here.
Great to be here. So how's Los Angeles treating you?
It's good. Everyone here is freezing this week because it is kind of cold. It was in the 50s every morning. So I always enjoy getting up on these mornings and seeing the locals in their hats and puffy coats.
Right. Yeah, because you spend time in Iowa too, where real winters happen.
Yeah, I've been mostly a Midwesterner my whole life. So I've lived in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. So I'm not quite in cold weather mode yet, but the city of LA is in cold weather mode. People are breaking out their fall looks. So
yeah, 60s is freezing there, right?
Yeah, our high's only like 64 today, so I imagine there'll be a lot of scarves and stuff out there. So. Are
there fires still around there, or is that mostly up north?
Mostly up north. So far, it's been kind of uneventful for LA in October. 2 years ago when we were shooting Made for Love, we had to delay it for wildfires this time of year. So yeah, we're feeling lucky right now.
My uncle lives in Northern California, and it's quite different up there than around where you are right now. It's almost like you're in another country up there.
Yeah, it's a very different vibe, landscape. I don't know Northern California very well. I spend most of my time down here. So I think right now you can't smell smoke, which most falls you can. So that's a shift.
Right. So we're going to talk about your excellent novel, SUMMERLONG, which I read and enjoyed. In fact, I'll say that it mesmerized me. I couldn't put it down. I really, really liked the novel as a whole and what happened to these characters. And there's quite a few characters in the novel, and there's quite a few themes like infidelity and marriages and family life and creative life. Were Dawn and Claire the initial entry point, or was there another kind of like nugget for starting this particular story with you?
Yeah, so when I started the novel, and thank you for your kind words about it, I do still like this novel. Some of my novels are less exciting to me, but I'm still kind of in the throes of this one, in the sense that it began oddly from Charlie's point of view, who's maybe the fourth or fifth minor player, and I was really interested in, at the time I started it was like 2011 or 12, a story of a kind of young man who's almost bored and starts to do a kind of Iago-like involvement in a couple's marriage, almost out of a boredom. So it was a really dark novel, more along like Patricia Highsmith territory of somebody causing mischief. And as I was working on it, my first marriage began to fracture, and I got much more interested in the heaviness of that, of a couple that has a shared history, has children together, loves each other, and yet they keep pushing each other away more and more. And so, like, weirdly, I was less interested in doing a kind of dark noir novel, which is how this really started. It was really influenced by like people like Patricia Highsmith or James M. Cain, and then it became really about the sadness and the beauty of a marriage that's unraveling.
So that's an interesting segue for me into Charlie's dad, Gil. Mm-hmm. And if you don't mind, there's a selection from the book that I want to read because it really captivated me. and maybe you can comment about it a little bit when I'm done.
Mhm.
But there's a part where you describe about his father's kind of morning routine.
Mhm.
And what was funny is that after I read it, I thought, well, that's really lovely, because that's kind of like my ideal morning routine. So it says Gil did not buy a house, but lived instead in one half of a duplex owned by the college, a short walk from his office. His routine bordered on the monastic. Each morning he woke at 5, exercised, a vigorous run followed by calisthenics and dumbbell work in the duplex's empty second bedroom, then showered, ate a bowl of oatmeal and a piece of fruit, drank black coffee, and left for the office. He always arrived by 7, the first one to show up on the third floor. He would work on his book, expanding, revising, and annotating it until 10 o'clock, when he would open his office door and shift into teacher mode. Now, for me, that sounded really lovely as a writer, because I'm a morning routine type of writer. But here's the question. So later on, when Charlie actually finds out what his father has been writing this whole time, his great masterwork, it feels like a betrayal to him for his family life. But to me as a writer, it felt like a betrayal because of having that routine and putting all that work into it. Can you kind of explain? I'm not going to say what the revelation is, but can you kind of explain that betrayal and how you kind of dealt with it when writing it?
Yeah, with Gil's writing, I think I was really interested in the fact that when I was a young writer, I really had routines like that. This is before children. So in my 20s, I was so obsessed with finishing Please Don't Come Back from the Moon and beginning my quote unquote career, and like having I was that legitimacy that a first book provides, and the money I was able to make in a good advance on the first book, and I really needed money. Deeply in student loan debt and other debt at the time. So I had a really fierce routine. And again, this was before kids, but it would usually involve writing, then exercise, then more writing, and then going to my day job.
Right.
And was pretty monastic about it. I think to the detriment of my friendships and my relationship and other parts of my psyche. But when I had children and when I was writing SUMMERLONG, I had 2 young kids and was very, very much in the throes of more domestic life than creative life. You know, most of my days were not spent, writing. They were stolen time that I wrote. I realized how sort of selfish and somewhat male that view is, that you deserve that kind of life, and I think a lot of young men especially learn that that's how you should get to be as a writer, both from depictions of writers in movies or the Paris Review interviews we read as kids, writers at work stuff when we were reading about how the greats worked. And so I was just interested in somebody who had that and protected it, had that routine, and yet was also involved in this like fraudulent, long deception, self-deception and deception of the world around him. Because I think we also often believe that, the writer appears to be a writer, and doing all these very, boundaried and disciplined sort of creative structures, that then they're clearly doing something great. And I just love that twist that will, without giving it away, that Gil was not writing the great novel necessarily that he said he was.
Right. Yeah. I remember Charlie reading the first couple lines and cheering and saying, "Oh, I have something great here," and not recognizing what it was, just like him. I thought, wow, that's really beautiful. And then of course, when it reveals what it is, I thought, son of a bitch. I mean, that's literally what I thought, like that whole time. I mean, to kind of hold on to a lie like that for so long takes so much work. It's like, why didn't you just write a novel?
Yeah, I think I've been really interested in this because I've been researching the life and work of Ralph Ellison, who's I love the book Invisible Man, and
yes, excellent book,
and love his essays. And he never in his lifetime didn't publish a second novel. There was some posthumous stuff, so there were pages. Whether that was a book he loved or not loved, whether it felt like a book to him yet is up for debate. But the pressure on him, I think, is uniquely American, as like being sort of the Black novelist that the white establishment embraced at that time. And it was very much a time where like there's not really much more room for anyone else. So he was very much seen as an important novelist. And I think that pressure probably was absolutely agonizing. So I think that, maybe not the extent of Ellison, and Ellison, I think, had some real sort of institutional hurdles in terms of like just embedded racism and literary culture that he was dealing with in a time before it was even named or admitted by the white establishment. But Ellison being up here, but even Gil Gulliver in my book, the story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we need to do as an artist is probably the most damning thing about the process. Once you start thinking about what kind of novelist you are and what your future could be if you do this, and how the world sees you, like, you lose the process. And I think that's such a tricky thing for a novelist. So we have very great not writers like Ralph Ellison, who I think really fell into that hole of like, the next book is going to be scrutinized so heavily, I'm just can't get it out, can't finish it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine Harper Lee probably felt something similar.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I mean, how you can't get any higher in the stratosphere than what she accomplished. So
Yeah, I think that, and I think for the people who are that successful, it's interesting, but it's also, I think, interesting for those of us who labor in more obscurity, because I think we can still fall into that mental trap of thinking like, this is the book, this is the one that I'm going to be, it's going to launch me into a new echelon. But I mean, for every accomplishment I've ever had as a writer, whether it's been fellowships or publications or good review, TV stuff, like, it's never really felt any different. It's always still feels like work, and it feels like you don't feel like you're done. Like, oh, now I can relax. Now I feel appreciated. Now I feel known. Like, writers are messed up that way, but I think most humans are sort of wired to live in a constant agitated state about the future. And this culture really demands that. And I think, going back to Gil Gulliver, he just, kind of turned it off. He kind of delusionally decided he was doing great work. And I think he started to believe it, even as his dementia started to set in,
Yeah, there's this romantic notion about a writer, right? That they have a cat in their lap, they have a cocktail or a coffee, and they're writing by the fire, where the reality is most of my writing had been done in empty conference rooms, or stealing away a lunch break somewhere. I've written stuff in the car, anywhere I could get 30 or 45 minutes to write, 400 or 500 words. And so the romanticism of it is really not there. Although when I do get in that zone, I love it. It really doesn't matter where I'm at. Do you feel that same way?
Yeah, I mean, it takes me a while to get in that zone as I get older. When I was younger, it was easier. Maybe just I would have less responsibilities. But certainly,
do you think it's before you go on? Do you think outward life affects you getting into that headspace?
I think, yeah, and I think it's all a narrative in my head. It's all this, I need a day to write. But I will say, I have had one in my life, 1 month long residency when I was 25, which was, I wrote a novel in a month, which I threw away, but I learned how to write a novel, and that was invaluable. I've never had a month to write since that. In truth, the best writing I've done is in 1 or 2 hour shifts. I've had days where I've set aside 8, 10, 12 hours, and for revision and editing and stuff that can work. But that true generative new creativity, I finally have accepted that my brain's got 2 or 3 hours max on that. And if I start to accept that most of my good work will be done in the first 60 to 90 minutes of a writing day, it takes the pressure off needing an 8-hour day. Because the truth of the matter is, when I have 8 hours, there's a lot of time on Twitter and taking walks and making snacks. But if I have 60 to 90 minutes, that's really the best writing I do all day. And the rest of the day is kind of messing around. The reverse of that is I sometimes procrastinate all day. And then the last 60 or 90 minutes where I'm mad that I've wasted the day yield something great. So,
Right.
1 to 2 hours is really for the generative work, the new stuff, the discovery. It's exhausting if you do it right. The way I do it, I'm really tired after 2 hours of that writing.
I agree. I feel the same way. I found that the ideal length of time for me is about a length of an album. By the time the album's done, and I'll get that's another question I was going to ask you, but by the time the album's done, I'm like, okay, I'm done for the day. If I've written 500, 700 words, I'm pretty cool with it. I know you're a music fan.
Mhm.
Do you listen to music while you're actually writing, or it just music just inspire you at other times?
I do. I listen to music that I know the words really well to. If it's something new, it either needs to be instrumental or something that I just know so well. The musician I probably listen to the most when I write is Justin Vernon of Bon Iver, and I'm in this amazing place right now where I'm working with him on a television project and getting to collaborate with one of my like favorite musicians of all time. And that's been incredibly exciting for me to work with a non-writer. I've collaborated with other writers before, but to work with a musician in a a tangential way. It's not like we're typing a story together, but just like really writing something that I feel is in response and in the aesthetics of his music has been great. So I listen to a lot of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I'm a huge fan of music, and I would probably say that music is probably the most important thing in my process. So even if I'm not listening while I'm writing, the walks I take before and after, I'm often listening to music to put me
Mm-hmm.
in the mood. We talk about ideal day. My ideal day would be to get up and write and then take a nice walk in the woods by my house. I have a really lovely, huge, state park. I get to walk in and see almost nobody, listen to music and think about what I wrote and what's next. And then maybe have an hour after that walk to get those ideas down for the next day. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the dream day. But music is very much a part of me staying in the mood of it. I'll listen to the music of the mood of what I'm working on all day and night, in the background.
That works. That works. So you wrote something on Twitter recently that I want to ask you about. I hope you don't mind, but it struck a chord in me. So you said, I will say that this profession, which I'm assuming is writing, can really fuck you up. And my heart goes out to everyone who has given it a try and gotten fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
So what fucked you up about being a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I think I tweeted that in response to, which I won't get into, but the whole kidney story that was all over social media, about it was called Bad Art Friend. It was a New York Times piece, and like nobody comes off as great or perfect in that article, and I wasn't really interested in getting into the article and who did what to whom, but it struck me that this profession is weird. I think it's weird, and maybe all the arts are like this, but I think it's weirder than other professions in that you usually feel the need to do it earlier. And you live in a world where you want to do something so badly and you're afraid you won't get a chance to do it. So like you want to do something so badly and you're afraid you won't get a chance to do it. And by do it, I mean publish. I mean, we could all probably write for ourselves, but I think there is a joy in sharing it, right? So that I think messes people up. I think it's so easy to fall into competition, to stealing, to disparaging others, like that ego in us. It's a beautiful impulse. I want to share this voice with the world, but I think it can get really ugly and it messes us all up in different ways. I think there's definitely times in my life where I've been like jealous of other writers, and I think
Mm-hmm.
what a waste of energy that was, or
Right.
angry in television. I had an experience where somebody I trusted, became very dismissive of me and as a writer, and it was a big ego bruise. But I spent way too much time wanting justice, wanting that person to apologize or to be a better person. Once you're through those things, you see them as a waste from your real work. And I think that idea of this profession fucking you up is because you want it so bad. And it's not an easy one. And most things in your life conspire against it. The world isn't set up to be a contemplative, quiet writer who makes very little money. Like this is just not how this system is set up. So I think it's a constant vigilance. And I think it's harder in your 20s and 30s because you feel like there's no way you're going to get to do it. I'm at a point now where I know I get to do it. Like I've achieved at least some level of, enough success where I could probably keep doing it. Maybe not your dream publisher, your dream job, or your dream whatever, but I feel like a writer now, finally,
Mm-hmm.
at 46. So it's like, do I feel like a great writer? Do I feel like a fraud half the time? Yeah, because you still don't feel like what's in your head ever matches what you put into the world.
Right.
Yeah. So I think all that really messes people up. And I think um that's something I could talk about all day. It's like the mental challenges of this profession.
Right. Yeah. There's this notion that in United States that success equates you've made money doing it.
Mm,
And so there's this struggle that a lot of artists have and writers that you're not a success unless you got a deal, you got paid for a book, it made some kind of list. Otherwise, you're a failure.
mm,
And I know before, in the past, you would read about authors that, well, they didn't make it, they didn't sell a lot, so they were failures, and the quality of their work is not described at all.
yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
imagine that the thing is with me, I'm trying to sell my ninth book,
Hmm.
so I've written quite a few of them. I have a day job though,
Hmm.
and what has happened with me is that I've been able to crank out some books that I love, won some awards, um, and money's not really the motivation for me at this point. I just turned 50, and I find that I'm writing more now than I did when I started in my 20s and 30s. I'm really cranking out some stuff. What motivates you now that you said you've had some success,
Hmm.
right? You can attach some things that people think are pretty valuable to your name, having a television show, and but what really motivates you now that you've gotten past some of those things and realized that you've wasted some energy with jealousy and some ego things? What really
Yeah.
motivates you now?
It's a great question because I had set this really strange goal for myself, um, which sounds insane in the true sense of the word. It's like not a good thing. But when I was at 25, I wrote down that I wanted to win 2 NEAs and a Guggenheim before I turned 40.
Mm-hmm.
Those to me, coming out of a kind of an academic feeling, was like those were the validations, those fellowships, because the writers I admired all had them on their book jackets. And I think it was, I don't know, Jim Harrison or Tom McLean or someone like that. They won 2 NEAs, and I looked it up, and you could write. So I made this a goal. Um, when I turned 39, I won a second NEA, and I'd already won the other fellowships, which is absurd. In hindsight, the luck, that's pure luck. That doesn't mean I was better than any of the writers who applied. It was like
Mm-hmm.
pure luck of the judge who was happening to judge that year, connected with my work. And the absurdity of that luck, and also the fact that I wasn't satisfied. I was also like, wait a minute, what's next? Um, that taught me something I think really important, that like I didn't think I deserved those more than other applicants that year. And so that success actually taught me like that none of these things matter. And of course it's easier to do it after you win, you probably feel better. But I was just like, if it doesn't, if it I didn't win because I was any better than other people, it was just luck, then that means when I lose these things or get rejected, or I've had moments
Mm-hmm.
where a publisher didn't want a book, and those are like really dark times because you turn in a book and they don't like it. um but that also is luck. That's just like what the editor wants at that point in history. And like I guess what sorry, just a little stumbling on this answer, but my idea is like what I've realized about success is it really does depend so heavily on luck.
I have one more question before we move to lightning round. So now that you've been working on a new novel, can you talk about just how do you prepare for a project like that? Do you just kind of pants it out, or do you have detailed notes? Do you really work it out beforehand before you actually start working on writing the narrative itself?
I think what's happened with every single book I've written, yeah, all three published ones and the two that are in a drawer that didn't, three that didn't work out. So I've written six, published three. The unpublished three, only one I tried to publish. The other two kind of were DOA. But I think always what happens is I write a draft incredibly fast, 6 to 8 weeks, um, in a fever. Often blocking out time. Usually there's like a week or two where I go away somewhere and then I let it sit. And sometimes I let it sit for a year or two. And
Hmm.
so I've written a draft of a novel called Your Friends Who Love You. And it's sitting, and I'm gradually moving back into it. It'll probably be much, much different when it's done. but I basically need to write a 200 or 300 page draft and then think about the book and work on other stuff for about a year or two. And then someday, like it just reflared, like, oh, I know how to do this book, and it often is like a change in point of view, a new ending, a new tone. So this book is set in Los Angeles, which is, sort of one of the aesthetic challenge of leaving the Midwest for my fourth book. And it's pretty dark. It's about, some of the things I've seen people do to one another here that I think are brutal and unforgivable, but also funny, which it sounds like a weird juxtaposition. But the things people do to each other out here, especially in the entertainment industry, are for like such low stakes in the long run. It's all for money and fame and power, which is, absurdly ephemeral. So it's a comic novel, but it's I think it's still very, very much a spiritual book. It's probably my most spiritual. Like I feel like a deep spiritual connection to it. So I'm just taking my time on it, and it's changing. Yeah.
Excellent. Now's the time of the show for our lightning round. It's a concept we stole from Inside the Actors Studio, although it's not their concept. They stole it from Bernard Pivot, who stole it from Marcel Proust. A lot of people have used this concept. So, Dean Bakopoulos, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes.
Okay. What is your favorite word?
Luminous.
Nice. What is your least favorite word?
Yam.
Yes.
Like
what turned you on?
Closeness.
What turned you off?
Distance.
Opposites. Hello, goodbye. What is your idea of happiness?
A cabin on Lake Superior with a fire going and my family all around and some music playing in the background.
Sounds lovely. Who's your favorite author?
Alyssa Nutting.
Nice. That's some bonus points there. If you could be a character from a well-known novel, who would that be?
Probably The Boy from My Side of the Mountain by Gene George, which I read as a kid. Has remained this small, beautiful work for me ever since.
My daughter loves that book.
Yeah.
What profession other than your own would you want to attempt?
I'd want to be an actor, a stage actor, theater actor.
Really?
I guess I like to be broke too.
Okay, what profession would you least want to do?
Dentists. Don't like strangers' mouths, and I hate the sound of dental implements. So
Oh, yeah.
not do
that's
that.
Terrible. No. Okay, last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you reach the check-in desk?
That the people you loved know I'd like to hear God say, the people you love know how much you love them.
Excellent. Dean Bakopoulos, thanks for being on the show. Your lovely novel, SUMMERLONG. Everyone, please go get it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Appreciate it.
This has been a presentation of Austin Liti Limits, made possible with help from our good friends at Blue Ink Review, where typing "the end" is just the beginning. Find out more at blueinkreview.com.